welcome to Watch, Review, Repeat. This is the podcast where two best friends discuss the latest in film and television and then do it all over again the following episode. My name is Colton Brown, and joining me is Andrew Meadows.
Except today, we're not covering the latest.
Indeed, we are not. You know, I had the exact same thought as I was reading that out. I was like, you know what? It doesn't really apply to what's happening on this particular episode because, oh baby, we have a surprise bonus episode lined up for the good patrons and later on for the supporters of the pod, the listeners of the pod. Yeah, a little bit out of nowhere, but we're going back in time. We're going way back in time for what the movie actually covers, but we're going almost 2 decades, 20 years back in time to a 2004 film called Troy for this bonus episode. It'll be a fun one, I think. It'll be a fun one. So I think a lot to set up before we get into Troy, and I should also mention that, you know, Andrew and I haven't recorded on anything for quite a while. I think it's been since we finished up our Barbenheimer coverage, which was, I think, a few weeks ago-ish, or it feels like a while ago, I'll say.
Yeah, it does.
He's currently in the midst of a hurricane, mostly avoiding Dade City is what it sounds like. So
flew right by.
Other parts of Florida, maybe not having the best time, best luck, like Andrew is, but hey, we're trucking on with the bonus episode. So this is bonus episode number 28 by my count, which may or may not be accurate. I think it's been a little while. I think it's the first one we've done in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Now, to be fair, we've done special episodes pretty frequently with everyone getting married and doing some travel and all that good stuff. But a proper bonus episode, you know, taking a movie from not necessarily, you know, the most recent releases and having fun with it, you know, and choosing the topic, choosing something that just seems interesting and compelling, and we just have the motivation and desire to do it. We haven't done that in a while, not since, I believe, 7 Decades of Horror, which I think would have been our Halloween episode of last year. So it's been we're coming up on a year since we've done a proper bonus episode. So it's kind of something that came together fairly quickly and somewhat unexpectedly, and it's now planned, but at the time it was just kind of like, you want to do this? It's like, okay, yeah, sure. So we'll get into the inspiration in a little bit, but yeah, it's a fun thing nonetheless. Now, I will explain a little bit about what the bonus episodes are, especially given that it has been some time since we've done one.
It's probably fair, yeah.
We treat these as timed exclusive episodes for our supporters on Patreon. So it will be up on Patreon exclusively for our supporters for some amount of time, and then at some point it will go up on the regular feed. So you're either listening to this as a supporter of Patreon, a supporter of us on Patreon, in which case I will say thank you very much for supporting us. And if you're not a supporter on Patreon and you are listening to this on the regular feed, whenever the case may be, maybe it's September, maybe it's October, I'm not sure exactly when it'll line up to be up on there. Hey, we might be doing more of these bonus episodes, is what I'll say right now. And if you want to be among the first to listen to them, my recommendation is that you support us on Patreon. It is a pretty low stakes, low cost kind of thing. $2 a month if you go to patreon.com/watchreviewrepeat gets you early access to not only bonus episodes like this, but also early access to all of our regular episodes. And something like Barbenheimer, which I just mentioned, that went up as 2 separate episodes way before that final version of the episode went up on the regular feed. So that's the kind of thing that you could get access to. You also get fun little episode scripts, and you know, it's just it's basically the premiere version of Watch Review Repeat for anyone that's interested. And we set the price pretty low, I think, to make it affordable for people. But also we do use that money and put it right back into the podcast in terms of, we've upgraded microphones in the past. It goes to supporting our hosting costs for the website, for the podcast itself and everything. So it's it's lining our pockets, but not really. You know what I mean? So it's all for a good cause. You know, it's basically just, you know, the people that support us. We just try to make the show better and try to do things that are fun and cool for you guys. You know, and we don't want to exclude everyone, but we think that there's some pretty cool incentives for those who do want to financially support us in that particular way. So that's the bonus episode deal. And we've done a bunch of them. We've done a bunch of them in the past, covering a wide range of things. We did many Game of Thrones ones once upon a time. before we knew what the final season would be like. And by the time we got to season 5 or 6, I think the final season had started, and we're like, oh, maybe this wasn't the best idea we've ever had. Some other ones have been a little bit more contained. I think the thing is, what we tend to do with a lot of the bonus episodes, and this is somewhat jumping ahead again too, we try to do too much. We've done like the MCU phase 1, 2, and 3. We're talking like 6 movies, 7 movies, 8 movies. We really try to pack a punch with each bonus episode. And as our listeners no doubt have realized from our weird irregular release schedule in 2023, Andrew is a dad. He's a new dad. Baby B is what, 2+ months old now? Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. He's 31. Yeah.
30, he's 31. Okay.
No, he's 3 months. Yeah, he's 3 months here very soon.
Okay, he's coming up, but yeah, very very soon. That's right.
Yeah.
We don't have the time to do, to watch, 19 3-hour epic movies if we would like to, and cover it in a single episode. It's harder. Even getting you to a theater to see a brand new movie is sometimes like pulling teeth, just to find the time, really, between work schedule and dad life and all that. So we're committed to keeping this thing going because it's a fun avenue for us that keeps us connected to each other. And we hope that certainly listeners enjoy the experience of us sharing our thoughts on whatever it is that we're talking about. But we figured, I think with this one, keep it short and sweet. Now, this movie is not necessarily short. Maybe it's sweet. I don't know. We'll get into it. But certainly covering one movie is not biting off more than we can chew, which is, again, how a lot of those bonus episodes in the past have gone, which was fine when, maybe when we were single, which was fine maybe when you didn't have a child. But, times are a-changing or whatever, and so this is kind of what we're doing. There's a reason we haven't done a bonus episode in such a long time, and I think this is a really good way to do it, is to just keep it focused, right? So we are covering Troy, the 2004 film Troy. We're hoping this might be the beginning of a series of maybe bonus episodes, kind of on similar types of films, historical epics, maybe, a Gladiator or something, along those lines where, you got some pretty cool shit happening and it's a big grand thing. Maybe we'll do kind of just one-off deals like this. Pick a movie, talk about it, put it up as a bonus episode, and and it's just a fun way for us to a fun movie in the first place for us to watch, and then a fun way to spend some time together for us is just we don't worry about news, we don't worry about people dying, because let me just say, the next episode that we record in time is going to be a rough one. Let's put it that way, which by the time the regular listeners are hearing this is some time travel-y bullshit. They'll have probably heard that and been like, man, that was a lot of people that died. But this is nice and simple. So, and so hopefully we'll have many more along these lines in this kind of series of bonus episodes, in the way that we hoped we would do a Studio Ghibli series of bonus episodes and then stopped after one. Maybe this can be a little bit.
Maybe
we could always come back to that.
Studio Ghibli, just movie by movie.
Maybe we could do that. Yeah, kind of
maybe
do
these
that,
bonus episodes, rather than being like you were saying, rather than being giant episodes, maybe it's just a movie in between episodes.
Totally. And I think the thing is, the episodes themselves are never too intensive to record. I mean, we're coming off the back of a 4-hour Barbenheimer thing, which was like a hell of an endeavor to just pull off. The bigger thing is just investing the time and watching all these movies, you know what I mean? And even this movie, it's one movie, but the one we watched was 3+ hours. So, it's still not nothing at the end of the day. So time is limited. We do what we can, and this is what we're doing. And I think that's pretty cool. I think it's pretty fun.
It's fun, yeah.
And I think something else that's fun is a fun fact, which we don't necessarily trot out with every bonus episode. Again, maybe because we're covering 5-6 movies, 5-6 fun facts might be a little crazy. But one movie, one fun fact. I think that's doable, don't you think?
I think it's more than fair.
All right, so I am going to present a fun fact on the movie Troy, and I'm going to provide a little bit of background before I get to the real fun fact of the root of this. Now, a major character in this film is Achilles, based off of the Exactly. Based off of the mythological character Achilles. Some very slight backstory on Achilles, and I'm going to say I'm not going to get too much into a lot of the mythological stuff. We may have a special guest that could drop by a little bit towards the end of this episode to give us that perspective that maybe Andrew and I don't have a ton of. But I do know, and I do know this from reading Wikipedia, and I think Anna might have told me this previously anyway, that Achilles in the mythology is basically invulnerable everywhere on his body except for his heel. And the reason for that is because his mother dipped him in the river Styx as an infant, holding him by one of the heels. So that's the part that didn't, get exposed that would protect him. So now in modern terms, we think of an Achilles heel as something that's, a weak point or something like that. There's also an Achilles tendon, which is basically kind of where he gets struck and injured, to get into the lore a little bit. So that's all pretty cool. You've had a lot of influence into using these things that are on our modern vernacular. The reason I bring all of that up is because during the filming of this movie, Mr. Brad Pitt, who himself portrays Achilles, or I should say as well, sometimes called Achilles if you are a contestant on the Wheel of Fortune.
No.
And Pat said that's incorrect because that's just not right. You said Achilles. That's not it. It's not it. Look it up. It's on YouTube for sure. Although I think if you just write out Achilles, I guess it's the same thing. So just Achilles Wheel of Fortune will get you there certainly. Brad Pitt had to film a scene where he was squaring off against Nathan Jones, who's a big motherfucker, we should say.
Yeah.
He's Boagrius, the character in the movie. During Boagrius, there's a point, where he does like a leap, and he does it a lot. He does this fancy fucking leap when he's attacking people. When Brad Pitt came down as they were filming the scene, something went wrong. Brad Pitt injured his Achilles tendon in the process of filming that.
No.
So I mean, I think that's pretty fun. So
that's
they
a
had
sign from the gods, right?
It is. I think it might be a sign from the gods. So basically, they had to shoot around his injury. I think they maybe finished filming this particular scene later on. I think the big duel sequence was shot a lot later on after he'd had some time to recover. So yeah, the gods came in and said, Brad Pitt, if you are Achilles, then you will get to experience his pain. So yeah, so there you have it. That's my fun fact that I have to offer regarding Troy. So why don't we move on? And since this is the first historical epic, and to be fair, this is somewhat historical, you might say, because it's based off of mythology more so than actual history necessarily. I think there's some contention about whether the Trojan War actually happened, and that's stuff that's certainly outside of my sphere, so I will leave that alone.
Not give an opinion
is.
about that?
But
okay.
I will say I think that this is a film that certainly could be fairly considered a historical epic. If nothing else, it's an epic film. So what's an epic film maybe is the next question. Epic films are a style of filmmaking with large scale, sweeping scope and spectacle. Big, long, typically historical things, just big costumes, period pieces, big score, an ensemble cast, expensive movies to make. That's the sorts of things that you're talking about with an epic. So examples would include maybe Troy. They would also include, I think I mentioned Gladiator earlier. You're talking maybe a Ben-Hur, a Spartacus. Many others. Kingdom of Heaven. Lots of examples of what these movies are. The upcoming Napoleon would be one that fits as well.
Epic,
Ridley Scott loves to do a fucking epic, a historical epic. When he's not making shit alien movies, that's what he's up to, or making.
They really are special movies. I mean,
it's just there's nothing quite like them. I think is maybe a fair way of putting it. And look, watching one is an investment of your time. You really have to be into it and get into it. And I don't know that they're necessarily for everyone, but they're certainly a special kind of a genre of unto themselves. And so,
yes.
very, very cool. Now, what I want to say before again, I feel like I'm just pushing things off. This is going to be a short and sweet episode, except for all the 15 minutes of bullshit that I have to say before we talk about the movie. You were the one that thought, let's do this. Let's talk about some of these movies. Let's talk about Troy. So I want you to tell the listeners, how did this come to be? What was your thinking?
So shortly after recording our Oppenheimer or Barbenheimer episode, I contracted COVID, and that sucked. Again,
yes.
it wasn't very pleasant. And
number 3 for you?
Number 2. I think
number 2,
it's
second bout. Okay,
I think it's number 2. Yeah. Which, there's a lot to be said about vaccines and boosters and this and that, because I only had 3 days down, and I wasn't in my deathbed for those 3 days like my first.
A little better than the first go around.
Way better. Still sucked.
Sure,
but way better. And anyways, so in between my sleep patterns became irregular at a certain point, and I got to thinking, because you guys just came back from Rome.
Sure.
And
sure.
I am in the midst of Stephen Fry's Mythos book, which is like a compendium of Greek mythological stories and stuff, which is pretty cool. And I'm trying to get through Marcus Aurelius's Meditations as well. So it's not really Greek. I mean, it's Roman, but it's old shit. It's old European.
You're
stuff.
digging all this old shit.
Yeah. And that's it's partially. I've always been inclined to enjoy that stuff. But I would say a large push of it came from your trip from Rome. I was just kind of inspired to kind of like take a dive on the history and the culture and this and that, and kind of like live almost, if I was going on the trip that you went on, this would be all the shit that I would do to prep for the trip. And, just kind of living vicariously through you. Sarah's parents just booked a European cruise. And I won't be going on that either.
Well, you got your whole life to live, though, at the same time. You got some baby stuff to worry about for now. But there may come a point in time where you could find yourself sailing across the Atlantic, so...
anyways, needless
Maybe
to
not
say,
sailing.
I've been
Probably
inspired.
flying. Probably not sailing.
I
you could
would
sail
fly.
if you wanted to, but,
I would definitely fly. But, I've been inspired by everyone around me, and to just take a quick bite on all the stuff that's Greek and
classical civilizations. That's your thing.
That's it, exactly. I'm enjoying it a lot right now, and I got to and growing up, I like Troy, for example. I've seen Troy like probably 24 times. Now,
okay, it's a staple.
I haven't seen it. Like, that was my movie. Like, hey, you want to come over and watch a movie? Like, that was my, like.
Well, I think Anna mentioned I think she's in a similar boat where she watched it a shit ton, and I think it was on TV a lot is where she watched it. So I don't know if that's kind of maybe that was a similar story for you, or maybe you had the DVD back in the day, or maybe you were pretty cool like that.
I can't remember how I watched it. I just know I watched it a shit ton of times. Like every time they go to say something, I knew the lines.
Okay,
it's like, wow. That's remarkable. I haven't seen Troy in probably, I don't know. I probably haven't seen Troy in at least 10 years.
Yeah, decade.
At least 10. Yeah. So I got to I texted you in the middle of the night. Hey, you want to do, like, we were talking about our regular release schedule, and I'd be like, hey, it'd be fun to do like a bonus episode on an epic movie, and just talk about it or whatever. And then you brought up the maybe doing a series of them, and I don't know. It was just, that was kind of the inspiration. I've been inspired by the people taking European trips, and I've always enjoyed the stuff. I've always known a little bit about it, but Stephen Fry's Mythos book kind of got me real pumped about it. But
yeah, well, I was going to say, I mean, you were inspired by our trip to Rome and Italy and stuff, but we did not go with anything Roman for the beginning of this. We did indeed stick with the Greek mythology for our first movie to talk about. So are you ready to get into it? Are you ready to talk about Troy?
Definitely.
All right, let's get into it. Troy was originally released May 14th of 2004, going back almost a couple decades. Written by David Benioff, some sharp-eared listeners may recognize that name for a particular reason. Maybe we'll revisit that subject. The film was directed by Wolfgang Petersen. It is based on the Iliad by Homer, as well as other things, because it goes a little bit beyond the Iliad. It stars Brad Pitt, Eric Bana, Orlando Bloom, Diane Kruger, Brian Cox, Sean Bean, Brendan Gleeson, Rose Byrne, Garrett Hedlund, and Peter O'Toole. And Troy, Paris, Prince of Troy, abducts the legendary Greek beauty Helen, Queen of Sparta, starting a war led by heroes Achilles and Hector, which devastates the ancient world. So, Troy, you have now revisited it. I myself am not. I think I've of the two of us, I've seen this movie in full maybe once prior to this.
Oh wow! Okay.
I think I've probably
Recently,
seen.
or
No. Maybe on TV back in the day. I don't even know. I definitely didn't see this in theaters. I would have been 11 or.
Yeah, that definitely didn't happen.
So I didn't see it in theaters. My parents were pretty liberal about that sort of thing. But even then, I definitely didn't see this in theaters. But I think I probably would have seen. If I saw it all the way through, it probably was on TV. I definitely have seen it on TV, like flipping through channels, hotel channel kind of surfing sort of deal. It feels like it has popped up once or twice here and there. But for me, this was a pretty fresh experience coming in. I didn't know all the lines of dialogue, you might say. But something that I think maybe made it a fresh experience, perhaps for the both of us, is in 2007 they put out a director's cut, which is how I watched it. Which that's the version that I watched. Is that the version that you watched as well?
It was almost 200 minutes long.
It seems right. So the theatrical cut is 163 minutes, so it's shy of 3 hours.
It's like 197.
And then the director's cut, I think, 196 is what the listed runtime I have is. So it was first released in 2007 for the home release is where it came out, and it adds basically nearly 30 minutes of extra footage to the theatrical cut. There are some other additional changes. It's not as simple as like scenes being dropped in. I think there's a lot of stuff that's recut, different frames and stuff of scenes that were included, extended versions of scenes. Some of the score is also different as well. There was a sort of thing that happened where they hired this guy, Gabriel Yared, to do the score originally, and then for whatever reason, the people involved in this movie weren't happy with his score, so they brought in James Horner to do a complete replacement score, which he did in 4 weeks, and that's what happened. That's basically what was used in the theatrical cut, was the James Horner score. And I think for this one they went back to using some of the older stuff, and they replaced some of the score that was used in the theatrical cut, not only with the old score but also with just shit from other movies. So the Planet of the Apes score is used actually in a pretty key scene in this. The Danny Elfman 2001 Planet of the Apes, the Marky Mark one. So probably not the most recognizable version of it, but kind of interesting. Sort of changes. It's not just throwing in some deleted scenes. It was a full retooling of the film. Yeah. Yes, for sure. So obviously some of the lines of dialogue still remained consistent, as you can attest to, but yeah, quite a few changes. I myself was contemplating how do I watch this? How should I watch it? You can rent it. I think you can rent the theatrical cut. The director's cut is the only version that's available on Blu-ray, actually, and so that's actually what we ended up doing. We bought it as part of it's very funny. We could have gotten the Blu-ray of the Troy director's cut on its own for $13. Alternatively, we bought a 3-pack with 300 Rise of an Empire and Troy director's cut for $10 on Amazon. Yeah. So I already owned the first 300, but I didn't own the 300 pre-sequel. So now I have 2 new films that I added to the collection for 10 buckaroos.
Might all be part of a bonus
maybe
series.
we could do 300s. That's
get your money's worth.
Once upon a time, and if we have a 300 bonus episode, I'll say as much again. I had a big old fucking poster of Leonidas on my wall, half naked Jerry Butler on my wall. I'm not afraid to admit it. Okay, he's a very muscly man. I think
cool.
I think there was a point where summer camp we reenacted some 300 scenes as well. So
yeah, it was ridiculous.
that was our personality for a time. Let's put it that way.
It's cool.
Good old
man.
Zack Snyder.
Testosterone fueled fucking
Yeah.
300 Spartans. Yeah.
And Anna just opened the door and simulated a "This is Sparta" kick as well. So
that's true.
some pretty badass shit. So anyway, we're not talking about 300. Maybe that's another bonus episode sometime down the line. I wouldn't say no. But we're talking about Troy. We're talking about the fucking 3+ hour whopper of a director's cut of Troy. So how did it hold up for you? What did you think about Troy?
Troy is it's not it wasn't as good as I remembered it.
Had some nostalgia that, okay,
I to be
was
clear,
better
I
in
still
your
very
memory.
much yes, it was better in my memory. I remembered these epic fights. So you talk about Brad Pitt, starting just right at the beginning of the movie.
Let's do it.
Talk about Brad Pitt's fight against Bulgaris, or what the fuck?
Boagrius, the big fucker.
Boagrius. I remember this. It's like I remember it in slow motion.
Okay.
The whole sequence I remember being like just in my memory. It's padded out and it's long. Right.
This is your memory version of it. It's a 15-minute
then,
epic duel in your mind.
Which is just one like jumping, stab motion in this guy's trap, but yeah, it happens like that. But it's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty fucking cool. No doubt about that.
A little boy goes to wake up. Achilles, he needs you. Agamemnon needs you. Yeah. And he's like, Brad Pitt's waking up with these two naked women in his bed.
I think this is the first instance of some butts being featured in this movie quite prominently. Wolfgang Petersen is a butt man. He's an ass man for sure. And he doesn't discriminate. Men, women, whoever. Butts
all
everywhere.
The butts.
All the butts.
All the butts.
I will collect all the butts and film them to be in my movie, he says. But with a German accent.
That's true.
I will film of the butts.
All the butts.
All of the butts.
So we see Brad Pitt's butt in the right now, in that.
And don't you worry, listener at home. If you haven't seen this in a while, this may not be the only time that you get to see Brad Pitt's butt. It might show up later in the movie too.
Yep. Plenty of Brad Pitt was naked on set for at least probably five scenes.
Sure, for sure.
At one point, Sarah and Sarah, this was not Sarah's movie.
I think you might have deceived her a little bit walking into the viewing.
I told her it was it's one of the greatest love stories ever told. And I mean, it started a war was fought over Helen of Troy.
That's right.
Like it's not too deceiving. It's just not a 3-hour epic. I don't think that's quite her tea.
Sure.
Anyway, so she actually got up like right when like Brad Pitt was walking around naked after they took Hector's cousin, and he comes back from war and he's like washing all up, and Brad Pitt's all naked and Abby, and just looking fucking cool,
showing off a little bit,
showing off, yeah, I said, Gups, don't look at this. You take after you're built like your dad, and he's sitting there. He was actually in his diaper. Just sitting on the couch, and he had like his gut, and I said, "You won't have that, Gups. You probably just go to bed before you get upset." And Sarah took him to bed. Not. I feel like the biggest shortcoming, aside from there's one film technique in this movie that's used very prevalently, and it's I feel like it might be just. It's a dying art. Like it's just not you don't see it anymore. And
I can't imagine why.
It's the fucking face zooms.
Oh man,
you have like 4 lines of dialogue, and then you have like a zoom glory. Just like. I don't know how to describe it. It's really bizarre.
It's quite a unique filmmaking method employed by Mr. Wolfgang Petersen. Anna describes it as a Tarantino zoom, which I think is accurate.
Yeah,
It fits with the certain tone and feel of a Tarantino movie. Here in this 3-hour historical epic, it's fucking bizarre and it's jarring. I think I think the one that stood out to me the most was just this fucking random ass zoom in on Sean Bean, and it's like he's like walking away from the scene. He's like going into the background, but no, you're not done. The scene's not over for you. We're zooming in on you. just ridiculous.
Oh, and it's so funny too because he's like, they'll be talking about this. They'll be talking about this battle for ages. Did I tell you that there would be glory? And it just zooms. It turns around. Sunbeam's kind of half mullet. He can
some half mullets going on here. Yeah, maybe full on mullets
over the shoulder. It's just it was. And there's a couple of face zooms. I think we have a face zoom on. You got a face zoom on the king of the King of Troy.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think you get one with Agamemnon. I think you get one with him too. Couple of different face zooms, and they're very. I mean, the most. The one that the loudest one, I should say, is the Sean Bean face zoom. But
that one was just. That one was just.
It's like
absurd.
the first one you get. It's the first one you get, and you're like, oh, this is what we're in for.
Okay, all right. So it's kind of the same feel like of the Mission Impossible 2 shit. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, oh fuck, that's what. Okay, all right. I didn't know that's what we're doing. I didn't know this was that kind of movie, but now that I know, okay, all right. I think I might be ready. Nope, I wasn't ready the next time it happened, but okay, I think I'm good now.
Here we are. I think that this, for me, this movie is. I don't think it's written particularly well.
Fair.
But it is. I think it captures. I think it captures what it is to be an epic movie. I think you've got. I don't know. You just have bookends, right? Like you have distinct chapters in the story. I think you have just not caricatures, but like just archetypes of characters and like what they stand for and what they want. I think that I don't think that the characters are terribly I don't think they're terribly deep characters. I think that I don't want to say that they're two-dimensional because it kind of sells them short, but they are kind of two-dimensional, right? Like they serve each character's like is for one thing, right? And that's, that's okay. I think that's what makes this particular movie appealing to a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, however old I was whenever I watched it. It made it very accessible for me. It made it a very simple story that the characters weren't terribly complex. Made them, and then you have these big epic fights, like the fight between Achilles and Hector, which is the one that you think of Troy. I don't immediately think of the Hector Achilles fight. I think of the first fight where he runs and jumps and stabs him. But the sound design and the practicality and just the Hector Achilles fight is really just, I mean, it's really good. I really enjoyed that sequence. Just the way that Achilles uses the fucking spear and the shield and all of it. I just, thought it was awesome. Really enjoyed the way that Brandon Pitt, Jesus Christ, the way Brad Pitt like animated Achilles, like the way that he just moved. He moved in like an otherworldly way.
Yeah, like the combat stuff. You mean?
Yeah, combat stuff. Yeah. He was just the way that he moved. It really does kind of give him a demigod kind of
it
feel.
Sold the idea that this guy is the greatest fucking warrior,
Yeah.
If Achilles fights for the Greeks, it's over for Troy. It feels like it's basically kind of what the movie boils down to a certain point.
That's right. They were about to leave. Troy can't be breached. I mean, they're just going to stand there behind their walls, and Hector does a excellent job of beating them back. I mean, before they infiltrate, before the Trojan horse. They're they were leaving. I mean, what are they going to do? It wasn't until Hector fucked up and killed Achilles' cousin, and that was that.
He thought he was Achilles, man.
Yeah. You let the world know that you're the fool that thought he killed Achilles. It's like, oh shit, god damn, dude. He was laying it on thick. Anyways, I thought it was it's a very fun movie. It's brought to life by its scope and by a series of really cool sequences. The writing is the characters are I feel like they're two-dimensional. I feel like that the writing really kind of falls short of what this movie could have been. But I feel like there's enough heart in the
movie
actors.
written by David Benioff isn't written well.
Maybe that's what it's funny you bring that up. I before the podcast, because I couldn't quite put on why I didn't. It wasn't until I looked it up before priming for this podcast. I looked up who wrote it, and Benioff. I said, "Oh,
things clicked into place very quickly."
Exactly. That's why. Wolverine Origins. What? Oh man, or whatever.
Maybe some other stuff too.
Maybe some other stuff like Game of Thrones and whatnot. I don't know,
sure.
But the writing fell short on this movie. It didn't quite deliver like the rest of it did. The rest of it, I think, delivered. I mean, you have an all-star cast.
Sure.
I feel like
great cast. Totally stacked.
And I think that everyone's well acted. I feel like their material is just kind of skin deep,
Yeah, sure.
And yeah, so you have an awesome scope. You have kind of wonky cinematography in some points, but in other points, it's really.
I think
cool.
it just feels dated. I think almost, where it's
it's a little dated.
and obviously, again, this is a movie that's almost 20 years old, but it doesn't have a timeless feel to it. In that,
No.
that particularly from a cinematographical, whatever the word I'm looking for is. Yeah, no, it didn't hold up on that front. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, I think some of the more epic war scenes and stuff like that are shot fine. It's not that hard to follow, and despite the kind of chaotic nature of a lot of it. But then it's the other bits where it's just like, all right, I mean, nothing to brag about.
He took like
here.
the worst bits. He took like the worst bits at the time that they filmed.
Sure,
they took the worst things of that era and put them in the movie. And in certain sequences, other sequences are totally fine, very serviceable. I think really what really sells the movie is the cast. The story as a whole,
the overall story more than the actual beats and the dialogue and whatever. Like the story itself is kind of that's a classic
premise.
story, obviously.
It's almost like it's not as bad, but it's almost like the story of like Palpatine and how, like the concept of Palpatine and how he took over fucking all the shit. Right?
Oh yeah, it's the coolest thing. But then the actual granular aspects of it are like, all right, George, maybe have someone do a pass on this script before you start filming. Yes, yeah, I think that's
similar
fair.
in nature, not as bad, but similar.
Yes.
Anyways, what are your thoughts? Being that you've only seen this movie, once.
Yeah,
maybe.
I mean, certainly once, at the very least once. Once for the director's cut for sure as well.
Okay.
I had fun with it. We got into a bad habit of pausing a lot, so we turned a 3-hour movie into about a 6-hour experience. But
okay.
And it wasn't necessarily like reflective of the film itself. I think it was just by design. We just knew we weren't ready to sit in front of the screen for 3 hours. And I think that's a fair warning, I guess, maybe to start with, of, hey, this movie's long, and I don't know that it's poorly paced or anything like that, but it covers a fuck ton of it. It just covers so much. I think that, even when you get to that point, and I guess I should backtrack. I didn't say as much, but I think it was sort of implied in the bonus episodes that we just do full spoilers from the get-go because we're usually covering movies that are
old.
You had a chance to watch Troy before you listen to this. You had 20 years to figure it out. So sorry. And also it's based off of a well-known story that has been around for much longer than you have as a listener, regardless of your age. So it's one of those things. I don't feel bad about it, but I figure I should at least make that abundantly clear, if nothing else. I think it just covers so much, and it's like a lot of these epic movies that are as long, where it's just there's chunks, and there's just kind of the bit where things are good, and then there's Helen being abducted, and then it obviously the first initial contact with the Greek armies showing up to Troy, and then you have this kind of bit with the Hector and Achilles, and then you have the whole sacking of Troy, which is just like a totally separate kind of thing that happens that's kind of the third act of this movie almost. So I think that it almost plays pretty well in segmented forms because you don't feel like you're losing a lot between, by pausing it so much. Because there are kind of these, the chapters, there's kind of the phases to the movie that I think work well for, if you wanted to make your 3-hour experience 6 hours and not a bad way, do some,
right.
do some other stuff during the other 3 hours or whatever. But I had fun with it overall. I think I really agree with a lot of what you said. I don't disagree with anything that you said, I don't think. I think that the criticisms that you have are the ones that I share. Cinematography has some wonkiness for sure. And the actual particular writing, I think a lot of it is because you're just covering so much material and it's truncated here and there, but also just the moments of dialogue are like fine, but not great, and I think that because there's just so much material that's being covered, you do kind of get these characters who are just these archetypes, right? You have warrior archetypes, you have, Helen's whole thing, I guess, is that she's pretty. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, everyone just kind of has a trait. Achilles is a badass, but he's like cool, and he sleeps with women. And he has his butt out a lot. And, Hector is like honorable and Paris is cowardly, and
right. Exactly.
Everyone's kind of just got, and Agamemnon is like power hungry or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, everyone kind of has their little thing that they have. And that's fine. That's good enough for something like this because you are kind of getting fairly surface level with a lot of this. It's fine to just kind of watch it and not get a ton of depth out of any of them, but still find them all enjoyable to watch at the same time.
That's right.
Great cast, very very good cast. I think Eric Bana is my personal standout. I think he's
absolutely.
I think he's the best single performance in this movie. I think he's the one that I think felt most committed to it and just, really good. Like, Brad Pitt is obviously ripped and handsome and whatever. He's kind of just Brad Pitt in a little bit, I think, at the same time, just in, ancient Greek, armor and stuff. And like the combat stuff I agree with, but I think his actual performance itself is fine, but not a standout. Brian Cox is good. He's having a grand old time. Sean Bean. That motherfucker survived. Can you believe that shit? Sean Bean surviving to the end. Brendan Gleeson was great. I think overall, Peter O'Toole was very good as well. I think the cast is just very good. Was good. But Eric Bana was I think just performance wise.
His accent on the speech, his epic speech I always found it a little funny.
Yeah.
What's he say? Shit. Says, I have a motto. Love your woman. Serve your country. he does something before they go out and fight. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely, but I don't remember the specifics of it.
His accent in that one particular instance was like, I don't know. I think that
it slipped a little bit, maybe.
It slipped a little bit, but
That's
largely
fair.
I think it was awesome.
Yeah, he's just
good performance.
And I think Hector's a very likable character. I think is probably also part of it too. But and a tragic figure, obviously, as happens with lots of these things. But at the end of the day, the cast I think carries it along with the production values. Like it was certainly, even for the time, I think a very expensive film. And I think it shows. I think overall, I feel like the scale of it is very impressive. I think the battle sequences are impressive. One thing about the director's cut is it is much more vicious, much more violent than the theatrical cut. I did look up the differences after the fact to kind of like fill in the gaps of like, all right, well, what wasn't here? And a lot of it is just like, people getting cleaved. And, I think there's one decapitation towards the end, which was
that one fucking guy with the stone hammer. He fucked some people up.
Yeah. So, and the sack of Troy is very, very violent. Lots of babies being thrown and women just kind of being raped on screen, that sort of thing. I'm not like in the most graphic way possible, but in a way that doesn't really hide the ball of what's happening. And a lot of that apparently was not in the theatrical cut. So I think they really up the violence and just kind of sadistic nature of a lot of things happening. So that's one thing for the director's cut, is it's very much pushing it into hard rated R territory. It might have been rated R in its original incarnation anyway, but I'm actually not sure.
I'm sure it was.
I think it just depends on how how they cut it in the first place, but I don't remember specifically enough just to say anything about that. But yeah, I had fun with it. I think there are parts of it that aren't great, even within like the stuff with Achilles and Briseis, who's Hector's cousin, is like a largely unnecessary side romantic plot, which is vaguely rapey in the beginning and still kind of problematic overall. And I don't know, it never really amounted to much. And and I don't know, I just kind of found it a little hokey, I think, in the scheme of things, where everything else feels, at least kind of has the feel of even if the dialogue isn't the best, it all kind of feels like it's in service of this epic story. Or that to me kind of just felt like an unnecessary inclusion in like the greater mythos.
It was an attempt to I think it was an attempt to give Achilles more than surface level characterization.
Yeah, it was an attempt for sure.
It just
totally an attempt. I absolutely agree. It was definitely an attempt.
Put him in with the rest of everyone else in this movie and just make him a surface level character.
I think it's trying to make him a little bit more likable, like, because he's like, yeah, I mean, his whole thing obviously is he has a shit fit with Agamemnon, and and doesn't want to play nice with him because he's kind of serving his own needs or whatever. And this gives him the motivation to kind of be involved in the third act, because otherwise he'd just take his fucking guys and sail home. But yeah, I don't know. Just didn't. That's honestly like the one singular storyline where I'm just like, didn't need that. Like, and I'm pretty sure that was in the original incarnation of this film as well. So I don't think there's any version of that works. I think it's just a kind of half-hearted attempt to make Achilles a little bit more likable and give him kind of some motivation in terms of like why he's getting involved in the way that he gets involved in the third act of, storming into Troy and searching for her. But I had fun with it, is what I'll say. I don't know if I have anything else too in depth to say about it. I mean, it's not, again, a particularly deep movie, but it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's got a lot of spectacle, it's got kind of the hallmarks of, I think, maybe what you'd want out of an epic movie. I think there are movies that certainly have better production values or better stories or better cinematography, and so this isn't exactly a hit on all fronts. But it has enough of the hallmarks, I think, for it to be successful in its own right. It's an interesting story told in kind of this grand way, and I really don't think we've had anything like I don't think we've had a version of the Iliad or anything like that told on such a grand scale, either prior to this or since this. And it's a classic story, but it's not one I feel like that's been done again. It's not a story that gets told every other year, so it's just like, well, this is just one example of a Shakespeare play or whatever where you have a million different incarnations. This is very much not that. This was kind of 20 years ago they thought, let's fucking chuck $200 million and do a big version of this, and it's not overly successful, but I think on the whole it's generally successful.
It's memorable at the very least. Good thing when it pops up on TV. It's a good hotel movie. I'm going to say it's better than a hotel movie. But it's not, it's not amazing at the same time either. But no, I think anyone who's looking for something to kind of just sink their teeth into, who's certainly maybe like you feeling the mythological itch and stuff, I think that this satisfies that. And obviously you can speak more to that particularly. Yeah. Coming off of reading Mythos and everything. But I think that it still hits home, in terms of feeling like a satisfying experience from that standpoint. Yeah, I think it does I think it does an effective job at telling the story and stuff, and it scratches an itch. I mean, Achilles by himself and is, he's a cool character. It's not even, I don't know. It's just cool shit, man. Give me some cool shit and I'm okay. You know what I mean?
There's plenty of cool shit in here. I mean, the duel itself is excellent, but just all the battle sequences, I think, as well, are just, they're cool, and you've got, you got likable, cool characters. Sean Bean's fucking cool. Brendan Gleeson, even though he's kind of an asshole, is a fun, cool character to follow. Even the characters that are unlikable or like assholes are fun to watch at the end of the day.
That's right.
Like, there's not a character in here where I'm like, I mean, maybe Orlando Bloom's a little bit like, oh, but even then he's fine, so it's everyone kind of has a role to play in the story, and contributes and is fun to watch. And even like the lesser known players are good fun too. So yeah,
I think that the thing that I find most interesting coming off of Mythos is the way that they portray Agamemnon, and like the way that he's kind of uniting the way that he's like all the countries of Greece are behind Agamemnon. Like he's taken all these city states, and now he's in control of all their armies, and now they're coming for Troy so he can take over Troy. I think that's kind of cool. That's something that I didn't really pay attention to when I was younger. It was all about Achilles and him kicking ass and chopping the head off Apollo and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But just the power plays and stuff of Agamemnon, I think, are interesting. Yeah. So I think it's definitely serviceable coming out of my storybook that I'm reading. So that's cool.
Good. Maybe the itch isn't fully scratched, and we'll have to continue talking about other movies of this
different
ilk,
movies. Maybe we can find a potentially more compelling, better movie. I'd be game
maybe we could. But before we do that, before we turn our attention to something else, I think maybe we should bring in a special guest to give a little extra perspective on Troy. Maybe a little bit more from a mythological perspective as well. So yeah, does that sound good to you?
That sounds good to me.
Joining us now is Anna Mattis.
Hello. I'm here.
Hello.
And I've been listening.
Oh,
so I have
creeping in on us,
some responses to things, but I'm also here for some background and
your unique perspective that you can lend that neither Andrew
Only you
nor
can,
I
yes.
can even dream of offering.
Well, I don't even know if I could call myself an expert, so
relative to us though.
Yeah,
relative to us. There we go.
Yeah.
We set the bar pretty low.
Yes. Well, I was a Latin major in school, which meant studying the history of classical civilizations, both ancient Rome and ancient Greece. And included in there, I took a mythology class for a whole semester. I took a Shakespeare and the classical tradition class, which brought in a lot of the mythology. And then I also took ancient Roman history and ancient Greek history. So all of that kind of comes into play here.
Definitely a big expert.
I guess. I've also seen this movie a lot, so that helps as well.
So I guess we start off by like, what's your opinion about of Troy? What do you think? How closely does it follow the?
Oh God, barely. I mean, I will say that like when I first watched Troy, I did not have the educational background, like the academic background to evaluate it in that sense. So I'm sure there are parts that I like less because I know there's another option for how it could go. But I, very much as like a teenager liked this movie, and I still find it very entertaining. It's just a little more cringe. There's parts that haven't aged well. But in terms of like as an adaptation, it's tough because the bulk of this movie is based on the Iliad. But the thing about the Iliad is, we attribute it to Homer. It's Homer's epic poem, but he didn't write it. So this was an epic poem that was passed down, dinner table to dinner table, campfire to campfire. This was passed down orally. And so it wasn't like it was written down for the first time. It's not like Homer necessarily came up with it. It's these stories that came together. It's why we honestly, like, I don't love this comparison, but I think it's the closest one we have. Like, we don't attribute an author to the Bible.
Right.
Like it's this collection of these stories that have been told year after year after year, and someone finally like put it down in writing. So that's just something to consider here, is that there's pieces of this myth in general that have probably been lost to history, which I'm sure, having read Mythos, which I am not as far as you in, but I am reading, there's a lot of discussion about, okay, well, this is part we know, but there's other stuff we don't know. And we know that there was something written about it. We know that existed because it's referenced in other things, but we don't actually have that thing, which is like a lot of what this field is. But the bulk of it is attributed to the Iliad. You can obviously like read the Iliad in Greek or whatever, but there's a lot of really great translations out there. And I have read it in its entirety once, probably about 10 years ago. So it's been a while. It's really long, which no surprise, it's an epic poem. The thing about the Iliad is that the Iliad ends with Hector's funeral and the idea that there's going to be 12 days of funeral games. And that's where it ends. Like, that's where the Iliad ends. There's other sources that have to come in and give like the rest of the story. And there's a few different ones that pick up at different places to continue the story after that. And then, of course, there's the Aeneid, which is, we see a glimpse of Aeneas at the end of Troy. And the idea is that
he's the one that gets the sword.
Yes, he gets the sword, which, of course, then is very silly because they have Paris survive and go with him. So it's very...
Like, what's the point of my sword bag, bitch?
Right. It's like very dumb. But the idea is that one of the founding myths of Rome is that it was founded by Aeneas after he fled.
Oh, there you go, Andrew. It does sort of tie back into Rome, actually.
It totally does tie into Rome.
In a sort of roundabout way.
Yep,
Okay. All right. Very good.
Yeah. So that's one of the founding myths of Rome. There's a few different ones, but that's one of them. It also, of course, goes right into the Odyssey as well, because Odysseus has to go home and it takes him 10 fucking years to get home. I don't think I've read all of the Aeneid. I know I've read I might have read all of it. I really can't remember. But I have read the Odyssey multiple times.
So does the Odyssey take place after the fall of Troy?
After it ends. After the war ends. It's about Odysseus going home and basically where his travels take him, because...
Is that written by Homer as well? Not to cut you off, but yeah.
I mean, this is the...
Or is it attributed to Homer? Like
I guess, yeah. Yes?
I think so.
Yeah, right? Because, yes, and the Aeneid is Virgil. The Aeneid is attributed to Virgil.
But these are all just oral stories that were collectively told by Homer.
Who knows if they actually, how much was from them and how much wasn't.
Right.
So yeah, so like that's one of the things that very much is, everything after Hector's death is pulling from other sources that aren't the Iliad. And it honestly gave me vibes, this movie, like, gives me vibes of Rings of Power and how they're like allowed to pull from Lord of the Rings, but they can't pull from Silmarillion. So they can't have it be exactly what it's written in the Silmarillion. It has to be a little different. So there are things that are different. So like, for example, like Paris fucking dies in combat. Like, Paris does not fucking survive. His younger brother marries Helen. Like, it's not a love story at all.
Do they have
for
a
them.
younger brother in this version?
No, I don't think
I
they
think
even
it's
show.
just the two of them.
There's like a fuck ton of kids. Like, they have a bunch of siblings. And there's other pieces to it. I'm like Ajax doesn't die that early. I don't think. I feel like Ajax is around for a long fucking time.
Ajax,
Which one's
aka
Ajax?
he's another big fucking guy. He's Sabretooth. He's one of the Greek.
He's the Greek, the Greek.
Is he the stone hammer guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Stonehammer guy. He's like, I am Ajax. All my enemies fear me, or what he says.
Oh,
He says
yeah.
some
He
shit.
Says something like,
Says some dumb shit.
behold me and tremble, or something like that. Like, yeah.
Get over yourself, dude.
Look at my big fucking hammer.
They shot him in the fucking leg, though. He breaks the arrow off like a badass. God, just fucking breaks it off with his leg. I watched this movie. thinking to myself, what a time to be alive. I'd be completely fucked.
We said that too. I literally
The Northman part two.
When Paris is like going up to fight Menelaus, when I turned to Colton and I said, imagine having generalized anxiety disorder in this time. Like, you'd be fucked. You'd be dead. You'd be dead if you had anxiety. Although honestly, I do think like Achilles gives a little of like depression vibes in the way that like sometimes he's just like chilling in his tent sleeping. I don't know. Whatever. I'm not gonna armchair diagnosis, fucking mythological figures. But yeah, it definitely you'd be fucked. I mean, yeah, we'd all be dead. Let's be real. But yeah, just like some other things that I think it's so interesting hearing about like a discussion about pacing for this movie, because this movie actually it condenses something that's 10 years.
Oh wow.
Into a week.
Couple weeks. Yeah,
couple
maybe.
weeks. Yeah, with a time jump of the 12 days. So like from when, I mean, first of all, I don't know how long it would take, but like there's some travel time involved to get from Sparta to Troy, first of all. This idea that they're like a day behind them after leaving 4 or 5 days late, like it's just kind of silly. But it doesn't really affect it. But I think
plus he has to get everybody else involved too, right?
Exactly. But then once they're in Troy, they're fighting for 10 years. It's a 10-year war. And basically everything that happens in this movie, or most of what happens in this movie, is stuff that all occurred in the 10th year or the 9th year of the war. 9th year, I think. I think the 9th year of the war. So that's just like an interesting thing to think about, especially towards the end. Like, I think this movie makes the Trojan horse seem like particularly fucking brutal. Because it's like, oh my God, like this is and then when you think about like, they've been there for 10 fucking years. Like these guys haven't seen their families. They haven't seen their homes. They haven't seen their kids, their wife, like whatever. Like it's been 10 fucking years. It's been a decade. Like they're ready to go the fuck home. So there's a real like desperation. And I think in this movie, it comes off as more like frustration that leads them to build the horse. But in the real myth, whatever, oxymoron, I guess, it's like desperation. They've been there for fucking ever. So I guess in terms of myth versus reality, the original...
It really changes the perspective of Odysseus, right?
Right, because then he's gone for another fucking 10 years. Yeah, he's away from home for 20 years.
Not only that, but like in the movie, he's perceived as kind of conniving. Let's figure out how we can breach the walls. And if you're telling me that they've been there for 10 years and the perspective is desperation, then he's a savior. You know what I mean?
For the
He's
Greeks.
guy that he ended the war.
This movie definitely, I think, frames the Greeks as the bad guys.
For sure.
Whereas like the original is, I don't know, not exactly bad guys and good guys, but it's definitely more Greek skewed.
This is which is a good interlude to my question. I have one question I've been eager to ask you.
Okay.
So in my perspective of the Trojans is that they're obviously noble people, right? But at the same time, they give into their impulses. Like Paris, they've been fighting for peace for all this time from Sparta, and then he goes and steals his wife.
Yeah. Right? So was that? Well, I'll say what finish because I definitely have an answer there.
And in Mythos, Zeus or Stephen Fry talks a lot about how Zeus is one huge belief in Greek mythology and just like the Greek people is respect of the host and the host respect of the guests. And so by going to Sparta under by presenting the olive branch and peace and this and that and by stealing his wife, it's a huge
insult.
It's a huge insult to all of Greece. Which the movie, like you said, the movie portrays Troy as I guess the good guys, right? Because they're not
right. It's about love. It's about love. They love each other.
Exactly, but
her husband neglects her. She's got to get out of there. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a total thing. Her husband's a total douchebag. At the same time, though, just with my brief thing into Greek mythology with the Mythos book and this and that, like, I mean, they did a fucking heinous thing. It's a heinous thing in normal days. You know what I mean? I could understand anybody being upset, but at the same time, you take those Greek, just the belief system that they have and the way that they thought and everything. The Trojans like disrespected Zeus and all the things that he represents and then not only that, my mind was like blown. It's like a whole different perspective that I didn't have the first time I watched the movie.
Yeah, well, here's more to blow your mind, because there's some really important context that's fully missing from this fucking movie about how they end up where they are. So one of the things to consider with the Iliad is that it's very much a myth, which means in the actual epic poem, the gods play a prominent role. In this movie, there's the idea that, okay, we're going to make an offering, we're going to pour out our wine, we're going to make an offering to Poseidon before we sail across the sea, like, Troy in particular, like their patron is Apollo, and, they have a temple to him, and they read these signs, like the augur and stuff. So in the actual epic poem, it's not just that they worship the gods are playing an active role in the war. They take sides. So like, I think the probably the biggest example in this movie, when Paris is losing the duel, he runs back to Hector, and Hector, saves him. In the epic poem, Paris is wounded, and Aphrodite herself comes down and rescues him. She whisks him away off the battlefield.
Didn't see that in this movie, did you?
Right. Like, the gods are not, like, in this movie, the gods are not real. Like, very much. In fact, it's almost mocking of the Trojans for having this belief in the gods, for thinking that the horse is a tribute, for thinking that these signs mean things. But in myth and in the epic poem, it's not myth to them. The gods are real. The gods are very much part of the Trojan War. They are taking sides. They're on the fucking battlefield at times, fighting for different sides, and they have kids on either side. I think Zeus was technically like neutral because he had kids on both sides. He had both Achilles and God, I don't even know who the fuck on the other side. There's a lot of, actually, Helen. I think there's one version of her myth is that Helen is a child of Zeus as well. Wow. So he, doesn't take a side. I mean, Apollo very obviously takes a side. I think Athena is with the Greeks. I mean, I assume she is. Athens is literally fucking named after her. So that's, important context in terms of the fight, but the gods are also, they're the whole reason this war starts. So the background myth that this movie skips over is that, what's her name? Metis? Is that her name? I think it's Metis. So Metis and Zeus, like, had a thing, and, whether or not it was that he got her pregnant, so she had to get married, or his wife wanted him to put her aside, whatever. There's all sorts of versions. But Metis was married off to an old human king. Metis was immortal. Metis was a Titan, I think. Although now I can't remember if... I'm sorry. This part, like, so I forget the names. I forget shit. Married off to Peleus. And so at the wedding of these two, the goddess of discord, I think her name is literally like Discordia, is not invited. She is very much not invited, because why would you want discord at your wedding? And so she is pissed. So she takes a golden apple and writes on it, in Greek, obviously, to the fairest. And she like throws it into the wedding. And 3 different goddesses see it and think it's for them. And they are Athena, Aphrodite, and Hera. And there's a fight over who does this belong to? Who is the fairest? We got to have somebody judge our contest. All right, who are we going to have? And I forget, somebody suggests this kid. I forget who it was who suggested this kid, but had them leave the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, that's what it is. It's Thetis, not Metis. Thetis. Leave the wedding and go like find some young goat herd on a hill somewhere, like some kid, like a human. Let's have him judge who the fairest is. And so they go and they ask him, and he's like, I can't choose your goddesses. And so they start to try to bribe him. And so Hera, who is the queen of the gods, offers him power and glory. And then Athena, who is the goddess of, war and wisdom, offers him wisdom and success in battle. And then Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love and lust, offers him the love of the most beautiful woman on earth. And it's a teenage boy. What do you think he fucking guessed? He picked Aphrodite. He said Aphrodite was the fairest. And so she, says that she'll make the most beautiful woman in the world fall in love with him, when he's older, whatever. Okay, well, that boy was Paris, and he didn't know he was a prince of Troy at the time because there had been a prophecy that Paris was going to be the downfall of Troy. Oh. So he was sent off into the mountains to live as a commoner, or somebody was supposed to kill him, and they didn't. It was very Snow White. Eventually, Paris is, going to Sparta, and whether he went there for peace or went there because he knew Helen was there and he knew she was, rumored to be the most beautiful woman on earth. And Aphrodite has her son Eros, aka Cupid, shoot, a bow and arrow or whatever, makes Helen fall in love with Paris as soon as she sees him.
Oh.
So that idea that they came in peace, they might not have been there in peace anyway. There was this prophecy, this was divine intervention saying you and Helen are going to fall in love and be together.
Meddling.
So then they leave. Right. It's very much what the gods do. So that's the, how the gods influence that. It's kind of their fault. But that's also why Aphrodite, Paris becomes her favorite. She is his patron. And yeah, actually Athena's definitely on the side of the Greeks because her favorite is Odysseus. So yeah, that's kind of the mythological background. And so the gods, not only basically start this war, but then they very much are a part of it. And a big part of the actual Iliad is about the gods' role in that. And then one thing I just wanted to bring up that you guys were talking about earlier, you were talking about the role of Briseis. And Briseis is not even, I think sometimes she feels like a character created for the movie, but she very much was a real character in the Iliad. And she was, or maybe not the Iliad, but in this myth generally. And I think she really was a cousin of the family. I'm not sure if that part's true, but she was a concubine. She was taken and, belonged or whatever to Achilles, and there was the taking of her by Agamemnon, all of that shit. The idea that there's a love story there is pretty silly because she was very much a captive and was almost certainly raped by Achilles. That's, those rapey vibes are there for a reason. In terms of why she is so prominent in this and so prominently a love story, which feels a little redundant because you've got Helen and Paris, who it's very set up as about love. You've got Hector and is it Andromache?
Yeah, I think that sounds right. His wife. Who, very much a love story. So you don't really need this additional one. And you guys were saying it's an attempt to give him another aspect. It's an attempt to make him more likable. No, it's an attempt to make him seem not gay. That's true. We've kind of glossed over Patroclus a little
That's why Briseis is in this movie, because they wanted to be very clear, no homo.
But all the Greeks are gay. Like, not all the Greeks,
Correct.
but I mean, yeah.
But yes,
very
it was
fluid.
very much like a part of Greek culture to have a mentor-mentee relationship between the two men that was also very much sexual. Like, that, it was just normal. Like, that wasn't a weird thing, but obviously, like, you know, in 2003 wasn't exactly being embraced. So, like, yeah, I guess Patroclus was probably, like, related somehow, but, like, they all fucking were related, you know? And yes, there was an age difference, saying. But, like, almost certainly there was a romantic sexual relationship between Achilles and
I feel like even just in the way that Achilles responds in this movie, there's definitely...
I don't know. I feel like this movie is very much setting up as like, it's his little cousin. He's very protective of him.
But I think that there's I think there's a fair reading of it that's... I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily the intent. I don't know if it's the intent of the filmmakers, right? But the way that he is so defensive of it feels.
It's always going to feel a little gay.
A little bit. A little gay.
Yeah. I mean, but that's very much what the Briseis introduction is, an attempt to
make it less gay.
To do there, you know. And I think, I mean, I guess I should, you know, Achilles almost certainly was very much fluid, or what we'd now consider bisexual or pansexual. Like,
yeah, he just boned everybody.
It was very normal, pretty much. So yeah, that's where like that piece comes in. But I think one other thing in terms of ending, I guess two things. One is that you know, we talked about this insult to Greece, and Agamemnon and Menelaus don't die at Troy. They go home. They win the war and they go the fuck home. And Menelaus takes Helen with him. And they live the rest of their lives quite happy together. They're good. He forgives her. She forgives him. They stay married. Some other shit goes down with that family. With Agamemnon and Menelaus, they're very much not in the clear after the Trojan War. But they don't die at Troy. Neither of them do. They both go home. So I think there's this.
I don't like the version of that story. I like the other story better.
There's a reason it's called
Siding
a
with
Greek
David Benioff,
fucking tragedy. Like, it's not supposed to have a happy ending. And ironically enough, I think this story in some ways feels better as an unhappy ending, because it shows you where this huge, you know, this movie doesn't even talk about how Odysseus isn't getting home for 10 more years. You know, I think there's something to the story that all this brutality, all of these epic insults to each other, like, they end in tragedy. Like, no one gets a fucking happy ending. And I think that's kind of the moral of the story.
That's a good
moral.
Of
course, the irony here is that in this case, the writer says, fuck any source material I could use. I'm going off book and doing whatever the fuck I want. And I'm going to give everybody a happy ending. When however many years later he turned to Game of Thrones and was like, oh, no source material. I guess I just better make it fucked up for everybody and write the worst fucking ending in television history. So
I don't want it.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, Danny just fucking forgot about the Iron Fleet. It's crazy.
David Benioff and butchering endings.
Yeah.
More iconic duo.
Correct. Unless it's when Mr. Cersei is there
bring
as well.
bring old DB Weiss in to really just add some salt to the wound.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think this movie is entertaining. It's funny. I think a lot of my memories of watching it are very much not the beginning and not the end. It's like from when they first attack Troy to like the duel between Achilles and Hector. I think like that's the section that I've seen the most, that I've tuned in for, and that's the best part of the film. Like, I think that stuff is the best. That the dynamics, the politics of Agamemnon and Achilles, the battle sequences.
That stuff is the best. For
the
sure.
story of Hector. Like, I think that's the strongest part of this movie. And that's the part I've seen the most. And so, like, I think that's why it's like a little more positive in my memory. But it's not a bad movie. It's not a great adaptation. So I'm glad they
Seems
called
like
it
it
Troy
very
and not something else.
deliberately changes a lot.
Yeah, they made it more cinematic.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah.
Happier ending and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except still a fuck ton of people die.
But it's mostly, I mean, like Hector dying and Achilles dying is, I feel like they are very much
But
portrayed as heroic characters, but then getting the victories.
Letting Paris and Helen and Briseis live and escape, and killing Agamemnon and Menelaus.
Yeah, that feels like an overall victory. Like there are sacrifices that were made in this war, but the end result is
the good guys won and the bad guys lost.
Right. You're right. Which, guess that's not the way it
dumbed down.
went down in the mythology.
Or history.
I have. That's one. I was going to say that's one of my follow-up questions. Is
did this shit happen?
Did any of this shit happen? All right, the gods probably didn't swoop down and intervene, perhaps, but
who knows?
Well, maybe they did.
Maybe
they
it was
didn't.
aliens. I don't know. Maybe it was the Eternals.
Oh, that's an idea there.
But in
go ahead. Sorry.
So for a long time, the reigning theory is that Troy was not a real place, that it was like Atlantis, it was mythological, it was not real, that this battle never happened. And it wasn't until, good Lord, the middle of the 20th century, I think, that they found archaeological evidence of Troy. And it was very much a real place.
Oh, yeah.
It was built up and burned down so many fucking times. I think they've found evidence of at least like 9 or 10 foundations, maybe even more than that. And so it took a while for them to like be able to confirm that, like, oh no, this was a real place, and it almost certainly engaged in battle with the Greeks. It's unlikely like that even this 10-year war over someone's wife, like that probably didn't happen. But there were probably years and years and years of fighting between Greece and Troy. So that part is very much real. We have archaeological evidence of that. But in terms of the timeline here and the way it happened, it is
could there have been
highly unlikely.
One incredibly badass guy that people thought, this guy's immortal, until somebody shot him in the fucking foot and then fucked him up. You know what I mean? They shot him in the foot and they went over and cut his throat. You know what I mean? Then I was the guy that killed Achilles.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's two things. I think one, like in the same way that we have athletes who we consider the GOAT, and there's a different one of every generation.
Yeah.
I think it's probably not even unlikely that there was somebody who might have even been named Achilles who was like a really, really good fighter. Probably not otherworldly, but you know, a great fighter. It is interesting. This movie actually has commentary. It's so not literal commentary, but they, you know, subtly say what their theory is, because obviously they're not going with the real, you know, supernatural stuff of him being dipped in the sticks with his mom holding his ankle and all that. But you'll notice that he doesn't actually just get shot in the ankle. He gets shot like 3 times in the fucking chest first.
Yeah,
but then he pulls the arrows out. So when people come and find him, all they see is the arrow sticking out of his heel.
Yeah.
So it's like a rumor that started like, oh my gosh, he was finally taken down by something in his heel. But really, like, he was killed by like a bunch of shots to the chest.
Alternatively, he could have been killed by all the archers posted up on Troy after he decided to desecrate Hector's corpse and run away with it.
I don't really understand that.
It just kind of feels like, you know, all right, you know, if he's not invulnerable because the gods don't really exist in this world, those archers, as soon as he's not playing by the rules or whatever, that they should just turn around and kill him then and there. That's what I would have done if I was fucking king, you know.
Maybe they were so stunned or
appalled.
Maybe David Benioff didn't think too hard about that.
Maybe the archers just forgot they had arrows.
The archers just forgot they had arrows.
Despite the fact that earlier in that same movie, they discussed having arrows and being able to shoot them, and they shot people, and oh god, the amount of times that Dani fucking mentions the Iron Fleet, but then somehow by the next episode she fucking forgot about him.
Like forgot. about your Andre
Danny
Joy?
sort of forgot about the Iron Fleet. Those motherfuckers. God, I'm so glad they met.
The warning signs were there as early as 2004. Don't trust David Benioff.
That's
to make
it.
an ending. Yeah. I'm
That's
glad
the
he
moral.
lost his Star Wars movie.
This fucking
Remember when
Confederate shell.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ. They
What
really
if
wanted
the Confederacy
to do that.
won the war?
What if the Confederacy won?
Yeah, that's what everyone
Oh my
needs.
God. They really they thought they did something there. And oh my God, a bunch of fucking morons. Have they done anything since Game of Thrones? Or are
They signed a deal with Netflix, I think, but
they
I
haven't
don't know
done
what they
anything.
actually
'Cause they're
produced.
totally
if anything.
unemployable because they
Yeah.
fucked it so bad. No one's gonna watch anything they made.
Right. It wasn't a mediocre ending. It wasn't a
was
bad ending. It was
the worst
an
ending.
astronomically terrible, career-ending sort of shit.
The worst
kind of
ending in
ending.
television history.
Yeah, it was pretty
real
bad.
Anyway, I have one more question, and I think I'm set on Troy. And this may I don't know, you may have to source Homer or whoever passed the oral tradition in this one. How bad do you think everyone in the Trojan horse smelled by the time they got there?
God, they all must have been shitting and pissing in there and
Are they pissing on each other? Are they shitting on each other? What's going on? What's the whole
disgusting.
what's the organizational
they were in there
scheme
for a
in
long
there?
Fucking time.
What does it look like on the inside? Does everyone have their own
a
little
nightmare.
human compartment? Is everyone just
They're shitting in the back left
just
leg.
limbs
Shit in the back
twisted?
left leg. Back there.
It's also funny because I don't know why they put so many in the horse. All they had to do was come open the doors.
Yeah, plus if they didn't bring it inside, or if they're just let's just set this on fire, and they just immediately hear screaming and
should have listened to Paris. Should have listened to Paris.
That's right. #Paris was right.
Fucking Paris.
All right. Well, I think I feel educated, first of all. So thank you for lending
Yes,
a
absolutely.
lot more insight, I think, than certainly we had going into this movie, walking away from this movie, although you did share some of the insight during the times that we paused watching. So I tried not to steal your thunder. I gave a little upfront stuff with Achilles at the beginning with my fun facts. But other than that, I tried to steer clear of that sort of thing, which is very much not my territory and is definitely more yours. So yeah, what do we think? Any final thoughts on Troy? Is this a good first epic movie to have focused on for a bonus episode?
I think it is. I think it
Can
is.
we do better in the future?
I think that there is
Room for improvement?
there's room for improvement. I think that there's other epic movies, but as an introduction to the genre of epic films,
It's a good one.
I think this
Pretty
one's
solid.
okay. Yeah.
It's fun. It's a lot of fun.
You can
Very
do
entertaining.
You can do worse,
Definitely could do worse. But it's a very entertaining film, even if it's not, shall we say, a great or even good one. It's good fun though at the same time. So I think we probably could recommend it.
Yeah,
I think if it's up your alley, it's a good fun popcorn movie with some good production values and some good set pieces and good performances.
it'll make you laugh. I can
yeah.
almost guarantee it'll make you laugh.
Yeah.
Good time.
All right. Well, I think it's time to wrap this bonus episode up then. I will go ahead and say thank you all for listening, whether you are listening to this as a supporter of us on Patreon or if you're listening to this on the regular feed. Regardless, we appreciate your support. If you enjoyed what you heard, we encourage you to spread the word to your friends, whoever. Give us a listen. I said as much in the beginning of the episode, but I'm gonna do it again, especially given that this is a bonus episode. If you want to support us on Patreon and get access to maybe some future bonus episodes where we continue our epic series here, you can go to patreon.com/watchreviewrepeat. Again, it's $2 a month, and you'll get not only those bonus episodes when they come out, you'll get early access to all of our regular episodes, which is handy when we record for really, really long times, which we tend to do because we kind of record infrequently these days. But I would encourage everyone to do that if it feels like something you want to do. Otherwise, if you want to get any more info on us, you can go to our website, watchreviewrepeat.com. We're on all of the social medias. Well, not all of them. We're on a few of them. We are on Twitter. Yep, it's still Twitter. I don't care what anyone else says. We're at
X.
WRRPod. We are on Instagram at watchreviewrepeat. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/watchreviewrepeat. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, maybe particularly for this, suggestions for other films to watch in this genre, we would certainly be happy to entertain those. Or if you yourself have some thoughts on Troy, you can send those our way to watchreviewrepeat@gmail.com. Our intro and outro track is Mechanolith by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com, licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license. I don't want to specifically say what we will do for our next bonus episode. Certainly Gladiator has come up in the conversation a few different times, and while that one is also kind of fictional, it's still rooted in history and certainly I think fits the mold of the kind of movies that we're talking about. But there are plenty of other options. We could indeed just go to 300. We could do anything. We could. There is an I don't want to say endless possibilities, but there are quite a few possibilities that we could go to. And I think the hope is that we won't wait too long before we circle back to something else, so we can kind of keep this series going, because it's fun. I had fun with this one, and I feel like I would be happy to just every now and then pop one of these movies in and take them in and talk about them. So Gladiator, something else will be a bonus episode, hopefully in the near future. As far as what the next regular episode is, kind of depends on when you're listening to this. So I will say reference our most recent regular episode. That's probably going to have the more accurate, up-to-date information of what's going on there. So that is going to do it for me, Anna. Thanks for coming on. Again, educating us, enlightening us. We appreciate having you on, giving us those insights.
Sure thing. Always happy to talk about the classics.
Yeah.
About classics.
It's almost like you care about that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
I got a degree in it.
That's right. All right. Well, Andrew, why don't you take us out?
Well, take care now. Bye-bye then.
Laters on the Menjay.
Fuck you, Benioff and Wise.